Now we have the Camelot co-founder and Camelot as the native dev of Arbitrum. Also, they are building very cool stuff, especially with the Arbit chains. For example, with Raya, with RariChain, Sanko, and more. And, well, Iron Boots, he made a long, long trip to arrive here today. He made it all from the castle, so yeah, let's give him a big of applause. Ooh, let's go, Iron.
So as you can tell, I'm Iron Boots from Camelot, and hopefully, if you're in the Arbitrum ecosystem, you're already aware of Camelot, and hopefully myself and what we do. So today, of course, appreciate the opportunity to actually speak, and I think just want to be able to share more about the journey. Camelot is a DEX, but we try and have a much broader role in the ecosystem, and now with our future roadmap, we're also taking a pretty new direction. So today, yeah, will be an opportunity to share where we are, but most importantly, where we are heading. By the way, this is like 20 kilos, so if I die, collapse, please record it. So the initial vision for Camelot was really, for a spot native DEX to be this long-term hub for the ecosystem, to move away from this short-term yield farm model and to really, like I say, play a broader role, be this ecosystem hub, be the front end for Arbitrum. So just to give the context, really, the foundation for Camelot's motivation and why we built the DEX and the opportunity that we saw is basically these 3 points. The first one being that spot AMM, spot liquidity, is really the most fundamental part of any on-chain ecosystem. The ability to swap tokens, whether it's the gas token, stable coins, meme coins, you can't have any other form of DeFi, leverage, liquidations, lending. You can't actually have this without spot liquidity, right? So the fact that spot AMM is the most fundamental part of any chain is often underappreciated, especially when Uni is kind of the incumbent in basically most of these places. The second part of this is really that almost every chain you see does have a native DEX. So there's a very strong inherent market fit for the fact that a chain should have a DEX catered specifically towards the ecosystem. You see this just from the fact alone of, like I say, trading the gas token, trading the meme coins of that ecosystem. Just having a DEX also acts as a proxy to speculate on the growth of that ecosystem. So it basically is on every single chain, right? There's really not many chains that don't have a native DEX. The third point being kind of the opportunity that we saw several years ago was that typically most of these native DEXs are actually low effort forks. The tech of an AMM is relatively similar in most places you look, but it's actually the underlying tokenomics and the business strategy that makes the difference. What was that? Did somebody shout, or am I hallucinating in this? But anyway, the short-term economics are often replicated in most of these native DEXs, and this was really the opportunity that Camelot saw where we could, like I say, build this longer-term model and take a much more serious approach to the role that DEX should play. Like I say, if you look at the first point, spot liquidity is fundamental. A native DEX does have strong inherent market fit. There's a very, very compelling business case to take the longer-term, more committed approach. And that was what was born of Camelot, to be the ecosystem hub, the front end, as well as the native DEX. So to pat ourselves on the back, we are now the largest native DEX. We've had over 21 billion volume traded. We've consistently held over 100 million in TVL for well over a year throughout the ups and downs of the market. And again, alongside these metrics, I think they speak for themselves in terms of our actual execution. But I think the most important thing is to really understand that we achieved this growth with an ecosystem-focused approach, right? For us, it's always been this balance of maximizing growth, maximizing metrics, but at the same time, actually doing so in a way that's aligned with Arbitrum, in a way that's committed to builders. And again, this role of being the hub of the ecosystem isn't just a marketing headline. It's something that we've genuinely been committed to in basically everything we do. One example of this is, of course, that we took the sword quite literally as the first protocol to propose ecosystem incentives to the Arbitrum DAO, which then led to the following framework groups. But again, I would just really emphasize, even with our token, as a DEX, your tokenomics are inseparable from the rest of your protocol design. You need your token to incentivize liquidity. So how well designed your token is, you can't break that apart from the rest of the protocol. We're completely self-funded. We never raised privately. We never have VCs. And from day one, the token and the launch of the token was modeled on, again, how can we make this part of our vision, part of our alignment? So again, I think I want to emphasize this because, especially these days, to be a completely self-funded protocol with real yield from day one is becoming increasingly more rare. Again, as a DEX, our business is liquidity. So a really key part of Camelot's success has been this pragmatic approach to what sustainable liquidity means, right? A lot of people kind of make the mistake of the only thing that matters when you discuss liquidity is efficiency. Who's got the highest numbers, who's the most efficient? For Camelot, we kind of disregarded this, and we've always followed a more holistic approach. And I'll give an example to kind of paint this picture more clearly. You could have one protocol that comes to Arbitrum. They bring in a lot of users. They bring in a lot of value. They have an app. This is a lot of value for Arbitrum. But maybe their token doesn't actually do much fees. Maybe it doesn't do much volume. On the other hand, you can have a stablecoin pool that does millions and millions. It looks incredibly efficient, but it generates no fees. Again, if you compare these side by side, it would make absolutely no sense to consider them equal. So for Camelot, it's always been about, OK, how can we generate sustainable liquidity, which means prioritizing fees, because when you have fees, you're not solely relying on incentives. But again, how can we do this in a way that does actually support the ecosystem, is aligned with Arbitrum, and hits our key vision of being this ecosystem hub? So again, hopefully everything here really emphasizes that this approach has been consistent in everything we've executed, and the graph here speaks for itself. Again, one of the simple metrics we like to point to is the fees, right? We've spent under 5-10 million in incentives to generate well over 30 million in fees. To us, this is one of the basic definitions of what it means to be sustainable. So I think that gives a pretty clear picture of where we are today. We are the largest native DEX. We have pretty good economics regardless of the market. Naturally, volumes go down in a market like this. But we've still found a model that works, and we've consistently executed on this. Well, that brings us to a position where we do feel like we can expand and scale up. But again, most importantly for us, it really doesn't make any sense to just go to OP or Polygon when we've spent so much time being aligned with Arbitrum, being invested in the ecosystem. To throw this away would really be throwing our work and our initial vision away. So this is where really I introduce Orbit chains, probably for a second time today. But for anybody that's not aware, Arbitrum Orbit is the tech stack that anybody can come and build an L2 or an L3 on. So when we first started to hear about this, we very quickly realized that this could become a significant part of Camelot's roadmap. Most importantly, because it would mean we could expand cross-chain, we could scale up, we could increase our ambitions, but we could do so in a way that was very aligned with our initial vision, our approach, being the ecosystem hub, being the front end of Arbitrum. These aren't just taglines, these are genuinely how we anchor ourselves on a day-to-day basis. And Arbitrum Orbit presented an opportunity to do this in a very new, more expansive way. Of course, we actually had to have a pretty bullish vision on the future of Orbit to be able to focus Camelot around this. So I would say the key thesis really driving this vision has been, first of all, there is going to be an explosion of rollups. Everybody argues every day, why do we need more L2s? Why do we need more L3s? The answer is irrelevant. You can launch a chain, a rollup, within 5 minutes on a website. There's multiple world-class rollup as a service providers offering this, and it costs relatively little to do so. So it's a pretty safe bet that there is going to be increasing number of rollups. Whether it's games, guys like Zai, Sanko, these guys are really the first to experiment. But we're going to see a BlackRock L2. We're going to see several of these. We're going to see an accounting firm use it as a server, et cetera. Kind of the points that Vitalik more eloquently described this morning. The second part of this very high conviction strategy is that we believe a large number of these rollups will be built on the Arbitrum Orbit stack. As part of kind of this thesis, we dove into basically every other rollup stack, and we strongly believe that Orbit is objectively the best stack. The other chains do all have comparable stacks. They have better, sexier branding sometimes. But in terms of tech, in terms of flexibility, customizability, you want to build on Orbit. Oh, OK. You missed the sexy animation. Anyway, this was really where we introduced Camelot as the orbital liquidity network. So just to break down really what that means beyond the buzzwords, it means that, first of all, like I mentioned in the first slide, spot liquidity is fundamental and critical to any chain. It might be more niche, it might be more specific, but without the basic liquidity infrastructure on a chain, you're going to struggle to grow, right? Whether this is meme coins, in-game assets, gas tokens, stable coins, et cetera. If you don't have the very basic liquidity infrastructure, you're not going to go very far. Camelot can now provide this to Orbit builders. Again, we have battle-tested tech, as you can see, over 20 billion volume. I believe we have one of the best kind of DEX products, especially on Arbitrum, and we can now give this to native Orbit builders. So there's genuinely a lot of inherent utility and value just by providing these chains with the infrastructure. But that's really not the vision. That's, again, just the basic level of what we will operate and execute on. The vision of the orbital liquidity network is, again, that you are going to have hundreds of rollups. They are going to be built on the Orbit stack, but you do need an ecosystem hub to make it feel like a cohesive network of chains. If you take the current trajectory, sometimes you don't even know these chains are built on Orbit. Somebody could build Node 2 and not even disclose it's on Orbit, and therefore you genuinely have increasing fragmentation. So for us, the goal and the role we want to play is to be the hub of these chains, right? To be able to make it feel like there is an Arbitrum ecosystem of chains using Arbitrum One as the main liquidity hub and have all of these Orbit as spokes coming off of it. This is more of a UX, a messaging, and like I say, a vision. The tech is already there, and Camelot really wants to be the actual hub for a user to navigate and explore this. That doesn't mean that Camelot is now going to suddenly start building cross-chain bridges, but what it means is that Camelot is the only app on the majority of these Orbit chains, and that means we have the user position to bring the best cross-chain solution directly to them. If you build the best cross-chain L2, L3 tech, it's pretty redundant unless a user actually wants to use it and it's right in front of their face. So again, this is the role of Camelot as the front end of Arbitrum, making those network effects happen. If I'm on a perp chain, I can easily go farm my buns on Sanko, can lose all my money on the roulette, and I can then go back to Arbitrum. That's the kind of flow we want to see that will make this an ecosystem with 10x more value than just fragmented chains. A little last bit at the end, the Orbital Accelerator Fund. We'll share much more on this later, but essentially it's an extension of our mentality where we're not just the DEX, we are the front end and the hub of the ecosystem, and that means investing, directly supporting, advising, and having a much deeper role throughout the chain and the ecosystem. So again, we are the only protocol actually deployed on multiple Orbit chains at the moment, and we really want to stay in the front seat to support these builders. And again, our Arbitrum alignment, I hope to say that we have a pretty good track record, and we will continue to want to be one of the biggest good actors in the ecosystem. So naturally, going from being on one chain to potentially hundreds or thousands is a pretty significant shift in our direction. And that means for the past several months, we've already been redeveloping our deployment pipeline so that we can scale up. If it takes us 2 months to deploy on each Orbit chain, then we're already behind the curve. So being able to actually scale up very quickly has been one of our key priorities. We're on 4 chains at the moment, and with each new chain, we've continued to speed up the process and make it much faster. And that's going to be one of our key goals in order to actually scale and expand properly. Naturally, as well, when you're on hundreds of chains, you have to think, how do you incentivize this? How do you bootstrap liquidity on these chains that need it or want it? So again, our devs are geniuses, and they've built a custom incentive system from the ground up, which we'll first deploy in Arbitrum One, again, keeping Arbitrum One as this deep liquidity hub, and then expanding it out to Orbit chains so that they have a permissionless incentive infrastructure to use. Again, really giving Orbit builders, Arbitrum builders, the best tech that we can offer. An extension of this is obviously gauges, which we've talked about for a while if you've followed us. But again, now it needs to be updated and evolved in the context of being on many, many Orbit chains. We work very closely with Algebra, who, for those that don't know, there's not many people actually developing AMM tech aside from Uni itself. There's probably less than 5 people in the market that are really working on this. And we've always had a very close relationship with Algebra team. And they've really been a key reason for how Camelot can compete at the level of Uniswap in terms of the AMM tech. And the new version, which is called Integral, is also another step in the direction that has more features than UniV4 and is already in the market. Again, that's going to be something that we work with them exclusively on to bring to Orbit chains. Again, the Accelerator Fund is really going to be a continual process, supporting chains, working with the best roll-up as a service providers, working with the best cross-chain solutions to really support the Orbit builders as much as we can financially, spiritually, and motivationally. And again, the final app, really, the final point really does summarize kind of the core vision of Camelot now, where the app is a hub for the user flow, right? You're swapping on Camelot on Arbitrum 1, you're buying DMT to then go to Sanko, you're swapping on Camelot on Sanko. The user flow is already there, and the more sticky that we can make this for a user, the more bullish it is for Arbitrum, the more bullish it is for the Arbitrum Orbit chains. Again, this is a process of working with the best cross-chain solutions in the market and having them directly on the Camelot app. Every other chain is trying to sell their interop solution, but what we believe is first, you kind of need to brute force the fragmentation in the L2, L3 market, and then you figure out the best multiple solutions on top. Trying to force people into one standard isn't going to work, and that's also another reason we're so bullish on the future of Orbit. So just to kind of wrap things up, I can't see anything. I have no idea how long I've been speaking for. So just to kind of go back to front, we really started with this initial vision that a spot DEX should play a much broader role, right? It should be this ecosystem hub. It should be the sustainable hub for long-term builders. We've achieved that. We're fortunate enough to have that success, and we're now expanding the same vision, approach, and mentality to Orbit chains. We strongly believe there's going to be an expansion, an explosion even of roll-ups, and this is really where we position ourselves to create the network effects for Arbitrum. If it's fragmented, hundreds of chains, it's bearish for everybody. If it's a network, a cohesive ecosystem of builders that are all feeding each other value and liquidity, then it's 10 times more bullish for Arbitrum and all of the individual chains. Again, leveraging the best cross-chain solutions, Camelot is going to be the only app actually natively deployed on all these chains and is therefore uniquely positioned to actually offer the best bridges, the best cross-chain swaps directly from the same UI. And finally, I have to mention the token. Grail token really has played a key role in being able to build a sustainable business. Like I say, no VCs, no private investors, and from day one, it has always captured value. This approach is extended to Orbit chains, where every Orbit chain outpost for Camelot will generate fees. These fees will be bridged back to Arbitrum. Again, another fact that will create this network. So holding Grail is really the simplest way to have exposure, not financial advice, to Orbit chains. So to finalize, Camelot really is the front end of Arbitrum, and now the front end of Arbitrum Orbit chains.